Hello and what is up YouTube? My name is G3Iron and we just got this announcement posted like moments ago from Bex herself in response to the various changes that were announced to the Atlas coming up in 3.10 Delirium League. So a moment ago we had like the announcement there will be no dev manifesto because there's so many various patch note changes that are coming, so they're just going to put it all in the patch notes. And then we had this. We do have a manifesto coming out about the Atlas, so kind of confusing, but all at the same time. Once again, thank you GGG for being transparent and for being open in your communication with us as a fan base. So I have yet to read this, so let's go ahead and dive in and read it together. This manifesto is in response to the feedback we received about this news article from earlier this week. Sustaining maps. In Conquerors of the Atlas, we dramatically and somewhat inadvertently increased the map drop rate through the following mechanisms. First, Conqueror influence adding a large amount of monsters and content to maps when spawned. Second, additional maps from Awakening levels, including Shaper and Guardian Elder maps. Third, synthesis unique maps dropped by bosses. Fourth, unique watchstones. Fifth, additional monsters spawned by higher tier sextants. Sixth, Conqueror maps being open for free by Zana. Seventh, the map mod effect from Awakening levels applying to quantity and pack size modifiers. Eighth, Blight going core, etc. Even though we did remove Shaper and Elder influence, the number of maps added was a lot higher than the amount we removed. Some of our team members finished the league with many hundreds of excess tier 14 maps in their stash. Players playing the league commented that Delve Cities did not feel rewarding anymore because in the past they were a great source of maps. Similar comments were made about the Temple of Atsuatl, which was also a good place to find maps in the past. The very easy access to maps in the Conqueror's endgame diminished the relative reward earned by running other game content. Okay, interesting. So nobody ever posts that they're getting a whole bunch of maps from one way and that they're not getting enough maps from another, because then it'll get nerfed, right? So don't complain. Just everyone say things are good. Oh, things are terrible. The best way to say thank you to GGG for buffing map drops is to say map drops are terrible and could you continually increase their drops. So the immediate impact of this, just quick commentary note, the immediate impact of this is that map prices are going to go up from where they were in 3.9. So those of you who are planning on building your currency pool early on in the league by trading maps and by getting the maps and then selling them to other players before anybody else does, that's good news because it means your maps are going to be worth more now on a per trade basis. Okay, let's continue. In addition to the above changes that made maps a lot easier to find, our plan for 3.10 was already going to take it even further. Improved Temple of Atsuatl, improved Vol side areas, they can now drop maps, Metamorph going core, Delirium being a high reward league if you take risks, and being able to tell when Conqueror influence is about to occur so that you can roll your maps for it to maximize drops. We decided to tweak the Awakening bonus objectives to remove the bonus to map tiers because it felt unnecessary after replacing it with the map mod effect, and it wasn't really an exciting bonus for most players to work towards. Okay, I guess. I mean, a lot of people are complaining about it. I'm not. Again, I'm just swimming in maps over here. I can remember a life and an existence prior to the release of Oriath where maps were like a pain in the butt to sustain. So in my book, this is still way more maps than what we used to have back in my day. But for players who are relatively new to Path of Exile over the last year to 2 years, then yeah, this is definitely going to feel like a bit of a nerfing compared to what 3.9 was. Playing through the Atlas in 3.10 will still result in a flood of maps compared to pre-3.9 POE. If you're worried about not being able to sustain maps easily, you needn't be. It feels good in our testing so far, and we will be keeping a very close eye on this. All right, so there you go. There's the promise from GGG. I would just, again, say on this, GGG is not like other game companies that don't test their game. Those games will go nameless for this discussion. But at the very least, if they're testing internally and they're saying, look, this is what we're seeing come out, I would say we as a fan base and as a player base have an opportunity during the first week of the league, as the most number of players are actually interacting with the league, to actually provide feedback. If maps feel bad, then that's the time to make an angry Reddit post, is during the very first week. If you have got enough of your bonuses and your percentages up on your atlas for completions, then it should feel good, right? You should have maps coming in, more maps coming in than going out on a considerable margin, even with these changes from 3.9. Target farming maps and Cartographer sealed. This is a big topic that we're still discussing internally. Philosophically, we don't like that Cartographer seals go against the natural progression of your atlas. Ideally, we'd prefer that things were designed in a way where uncompleting maps was not necessary. We want players to earn map completion and bonuses objectives and to feel good about having them. Cartographer seals work directly against that. I just gotta say amen to that, right? Like, that's a true statement. For those of you who are veteran players and you know what it feels like to shape your atlas and to uncomplete various levels of maps in order to give yourself a boost to your sustain, we're all used to those strategies. We all have watched several different videos, have played several different leagues. We've gotten a hang of it, right? For new players who are coming into Path of Exile, uncompleting a map is not intuitive, right? Going into your atlas and saying, hey, go get this bonus objective will give you, by killing the boss and by completing the map, this will give you better map drops, and this will give you more chance at a higher level to sustain your maps. And then your Cartographer seal comes along and says, hey, you know all that stuff that you did to work and progress your atlas? Go undo it all. There's a whole bunch of players I know, just in our guild, in the G3 guild, as well as in the community that we interact with, who, whenever they hear about Cartographer seals, and they hear about the way how we used to shape our atlases and the atlas strategies that came out about that, they're just like scratching their head. Like, that's so counterintuitive, and how would you know to do that unless you're, well, locked in on Reddit, locked in on the forums, locked in on YouTube, locked in on Twitch, and following players who are using that method? How else will you know that that's a valid way to go about farming the game? So it's interesting that philosophically, like, GGG is very often pushing the concept of, hey, you players have to figure this out. We're going to give you a difficult game, and you enjoy the ride of figuring it out. But in this way, GGG is clearly saying we don't want to penalize players to have to figure this aspect out, and so Cartographer seals, no, they're a no-go. They're no longer welcome in Path of Exile. So continuing on, Beck says, we have some ideas that we're discussing that should help on this front, and we'll let you know as they progress through internal testing. To be clear, our solution will not involve Cartographer seals coming back in the same form they were before. So they might come back, but they're not coming back in the same way they are before. By the way, if you're looking to set up your atlas to farm a particular tier or a particular map, there are ways that you can do it. You just have to set up multiple different atlases and play on multiple different accounts, which is totally compliant with the terms of service. You can have one Steam client as well as one standalone client. You're allowed to do that. So that's just something out there. It doesn't mean that you should. It doesn't mean that that's something that's enforced. It means that if you want to take your target farming of maps to the next strata, to the next level, then that's an option for you. It doesn't mean you have to do it. It means that that's something there for you. I know that that's something that I did even in 3.9 when we had all of those maps galores. I was actually running a near fully completed atlas on my main account, on my Steam account, and then a relatively blank atlas on my standalone account, so that way I would always have a constant supply of low tier maps in order to proc conquerors on my main account. So that's what I did. I essentially made it so that way I could save money from purchasing in bulk. Now, those of you out there could instantly say, well, if you just made enough currency on your main account, you could go buy those maps in bulk. And you're absolutely right? There's multiple approaches to this particular strategy for maximizing your atlas. So there's still options out there. That's what I'm trying to say. There's still options out there for you if you would like to min-max your atlas to that extent. All right, let's continue. Map mod effect. A separate goal in 3.10 was to make awakening objectives more desirable. As we just discussed, map drops were at an all-time high, so we didn't want to add more map drops to awakening objectives. Our plan was to move the popular map mod effect increases to the awakening objectives in order to give them more of an incentive. You're completely right that map mod effect isn't always positive for every build. For example, it can ruin ignite builds by making it impossible for monsters to be ignited. While map mods are designed to hinder your character, the map mod effect can sometimes push it over a reasonable limit. We will make adjustments to those cases. If there are any other problematic mods other than ailments, please let us know and we'll look at those too. Wow. Okay, so how many melee boys are instantly going to be like, hey, Fizz Reflect, Ellie Reflect? Yeah, that's That's interesting. So GGG is open to removing hazardous mods, or problematic, not necessarily hazardous, but problematic, like build destroying mods. That's interesting. That's interesting. Feel free to drop a comment below if there's something that destroys, that's a map mod that destroys your build. I think probably it's going to be the various ailment. Yeah, probably the various ailment avoiders are going to be probably the main culprits of that. Maybe there's a few here or there that might be, you know, outside of the mainstream that I can't think of off the top of my head. But that's kind of interesting. One thing that they could do for awakening objectives to just straight up be better, why not just add quantity? Like, just straight up add quantity. The more awakening objectives you get and the higher the tier map, just add quant. Just add quant. And a whole bunch of you out there, as soon as you hear me say that, is going to say, oh, Iron, you couldn't possibly say that because now the Magic Find boys are just going to go farm tier 16s. The Magic Find boys are already farming tier 16s, okay? Those who want to push their Magic Find builds to the top tier are already going to do that. If you want to make awakening objectives objectively better without having them be attached to map drops, just have them be tied up straight up into quantity. Like, players want to run quantity, and because of all of the health buffs and the damage buffs that have taken place to monsters, it's a lot tougher now to actually play Magic Find builds, and a whole bunch of players inside the community have actually turned away from those Magic Find builds that we've seen be the staple and the hallmark of so many different builds, using especially Wind Ripper, the particular unique bow that's basically the hallmark of Magic Find builds in Path of Exile. If you say, hey, look, we're going to give you more, you know, quantity drops for completing more awakening objectives, yeah, it could destroy the economy. Yeah, it could absolutely blow things out of proportion. So feel free to let me know down below if you think that's what it would do. But it would essentially and very effectively be an incentive. Hey, look, as you get more awakening objectives done, you will get a slight buff to your quant on these various maps. And maybe the higher tier you've got your maps going and the more difficult you've rolled your maps, maybe you'll get more quant, which, by the way, is inherent in the system of the mapping philosophy that GGG has put into effect, because as you scale up and as you craft your maps, they get better quantity and they get better rarity and they get better pack size. So I feel like that would actually be something that's consistent. If you want us, if you being GGG, if GGG wants us as players to be pushing for more awakening objectives, give us more quant and more of us are going to farm towards that end. That would be my initial suggestion. But I'm sure you guys have got suggestions down below. Feel free to leave all your reactions, comments, ideas, and of course point out all of the errors that GGG is making and angrily smash your keyboard with all of your comments down below. But I hope that 3.10 Delirium League is the league that a Mirror of Calandra drops for you. Thanks for watching that video. If you'd like more information on any of our discussion points today, you can see them down below in the video description. If you'd also like to join our Discord or support our Patreon, you can do so with the links down below. Thanks again, and big shout out to all of our Patreon supporters.